Hey guys, it's Emma. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am very excited to be talking about a specific domain in data science, and that is natural language processing NLP. I have invited my friend Deborshi to join with me today. He is a senior data scientist at Autodesk who has lots of experience working on NLP related projects. Today he will share with us his journey to landing such a position and some of the interesting NLP projects he has been working on at Autodesk. He will also give us advice on landing similar data science positions. So if you're interested, then keep on watching. All right. Hello, Deborshi. Thank you so much for being a part of this video. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be a part of this video as well. And yeah.
All right. So how about you actually kick off and tell me a little bit more about your background and your current position at Autodesk? I have a feeling I know a lot about it, but my audience might not.
Sure. So as you've already mentioned, I am a senior data scientist at Autodesk. What me and my team, we do at Autodesk is essentially we are in the space where we try to help our customers get to the right answers to their problems quicker, be it in the domain of customer support or be it in the domain of them trying to buy a product, or be it in the domain of them trying to learn how to use a product on our forum boards, right? So we sort of revolve in this space where we help our customers either use their products, buy their products, or troubleshoot their way out of products easier and quicker. So that's sort of the general area that we operate in. And I personally work in problems relating to natural language processing and a few problems around e-commerce, but mostly centrally natural language processing. In terms of more specific problems, things that I've worked on include text classification using neural networks and deploying those neural networks for services that are used by products that our customers interact with. A prime example of that being like Autodesk Virtual Agent, which is the customer-facing chatbot that Autodesk has.
Thank you for sharing all the interesting NLP projects you have been working on. So can you talk a little bit more about your background, how you land on such a position?
For sure, absolutely. So I actually did not start off as someone who's in, say, computer science, which a lot of folks who enter data science sort of get scared by. People tend to think you need to have a computer science background or you need to have a very strong coding background. I mean, you do need to have strong coding skills, but you don't necessarily need to have a degree in CS, right? My undergraduate degree was in mechanical engineering. I used to work with robotics and a lot of like unmanned aerial aviation kind of stuff, like drones and stuff. And that's sort of where I got a little bit of initial exposure to coding. But then I sort of transitioned from mechanical engineering to a more sort of industrial and enterprise systems engineering kind of area. That's where I did my master's. So I did my master's at the Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering in University of Illinois. And I graduated in the summer of 2019, which was 2 years ago. And my transition into data science has really been in the industrial and systems engineering department, where I specialized in the advanced data analytics field, and sort of got a little bit of background into working with big data and what working with analytics looks like, what working with algorithms looks like. And that sort of was my entry into the field of data science. And then I did my internship at Autodesk, and that got me a little bit of industry exposure into what it's like to work as a data scientist or a data analyst in the industry. And incidentally, it just happened by chance that the work that I was doing at the time as a data analyst was related to the field of natural language processing, and I had to do a lot of text analytics. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned like you basically land an intern position, right? Through that intern position, you got more experience working on NLP projects, and that helped you to land the full-time job.
Exactly. And I learned working with text data and text analytics and building ML models in NLP in my internship. Like I learned it on the fly because I just had to work with text data.
So actually, I'm curious about, did you get to choose what kind of projects you could work on during your internship, or you just had no choice and the company just assigned you those NLP projects?
Um, that's a good question. So I had choice in the way I wanted to execute the project and the way I wanted to finally deliver an output. That was entirely up to me, but the ask was pretty well defined, and the project was defined in the sense that the team that I was working for already knew that they wanted to do something with the text data that they had, and they needed an intern to sort of take on this sort of experimental venture and help them sort of get to the output that they were envisioning at the time.
Got it. So basically, the project was well defined, but the company was still looking for someone or an intern has relevant experience, right? But you also mentioned that you did not have any relevant NLP experience before you joining the company. So yeah, like how did you find such a position, and how was your interview experience? Any tips you could share in your job search process? Yeah, anything would be helpful.
That's a very good question. So part of it, I would say, was definitely luck, and there is no escaping the fact that sometimes stuff like this has an aspect of luck attached to it. I did not have specific experience working on natural language data, but what I did have was good or sound fundamentals in terms of what a data science project should look like. Before getting my internship, I was working with a professor at the university I was doing my master's at. I was working with like a research project team that was doing an entire like end-to-end project on data science. It wasn't in the same field. In fact, it was in computer vision and not in NLP. But at the same time, the structure and the skills that I learned from executing that kind of a data science project carried over. The concepts that I learned when I was studying machine learning and when I was studying algorithms and when I was studying data analytics at the university sort of carried over. In data science, in terms of general job search advice, I guess this is actually very important. Most people will never know everything, right? You will never know everything. Because data science is just such a broad and huge field. But what you want to make sure is that your skills are transferable. What you want to make sure is that part of the job execution comes from you, and the other part you can sort of pick up on the fly as you're executing the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I totally agree. I think no one knows everything before they start working, right? So if they know the fundamentals, it will help them to build the sense really quickly. So it will help them to work, to produce really fast in a short amount of time. So there's one thing I cannot help asking, because NLP data scientist sounds like a very technical position compared with, maybe more challenging than a product data scientist or data science analytics positions. So typically, for data scientists, machine learning positions, they have higher bars, and they require candidates to have relevant experience, years of experience. But for you started with the internship, right? And then you basically started the full-time job after your internship. So for people who don't have relevant experience in machine learning or NLP at all, do you recommend them applying for such positions? And also, what are the specific requirements for this kind of positions?
That's a very good question. So let me try and frame this answer in as structured a way as possible. NLP and doing machine learning, practicing machine learning and practicing good, effective data science in natural language processing is very hard. It is actually, I would say, one of the hardest fields within data science, right? However, because it is hard, there isn't a lot of expertise in it, right? There aren't a lot of data science practitioners who are good at NLP. And so you would be surprised how many opportunities you get access to the moment you have a little bit of your foot through the door. Even if you haven't worked on like LSTMs and deep learning architectures, just the ability to parse and code on text data, tokenize sentences, do parts of speech tagging, just that adds a lot. And to have that experience means a lot in your resume. So do real world projects on NLP, whether it be affiliated with like a professor that you are doing a research project with, or like a side project that you yourself are undertaking. Do real world projects.
I think this is very helpful, especially for people who are, looking to get into such a domain. Because people might think, this kind of position has very high bars, but as you mentioned, the demand is actually more than people think. And also the bars might not be as high as people imagine, right? So you also mentioned that one tip is to add this kind of NLP keywords to your resumes. So that could help teams or recruiters to know that you have relevant experience. So speaking of, like you mentioned that at least have the experience to parse text data, right? So speaking of, relevant experience or what kind of projects people can work on, or could you give us like overview of topics that people could start with to learn about NLP?
Absolutely. Again, like you don't have to know every single algorithm out there, but an understanding of what exists and what kind of literature you need to look for when you're practicing NLP out there in the real world, in the industry, is important. So even knowing what to look for is important. And so in that sense, so the way I categorize it is in like a few different areas, right? So it starts at pre-processing and just being able to wrangle textual data. That means being able to tokenize sentences, understanding what lemmatization and stemming is. Some of these come from, some of these might seem like very daunting terms, but they aren't really. And there are open source packages which let you do all of this. The second thing that I think is super important is vectorizing and embedding text. So if you were to just think about the problem of how do I do data science on text, right? The text has to be converted into a format where the machine learning algorithms or clustering algorithms or what have you, it has to be converted into a format in which those algorithms can understand the text, right? And what that means is essentially converting text into numbers, and that can look like a number of things. There are things called bag of words model, which all they look at is how many thes or how many reviews belong to a certain document. That way, you just essentially all you're doing is making a word count. And so that's how you build up like a vector or a set of vectors for all the documents that you have. There are other models which are like word to vec or doc to vec or sentence to vec, which aim to take advantage of the fact that words occur in sequences and words are surrounded by other words which give them meaning. So there are these algorithms called, the skipgram algorithm or the CBOW algorithm that do word to vec embeddings or doc to vec embeddings. And next, we sort of come into clustering and topic modeling, right? which is where we're trying to segment and cluster these groups of text documents into like similar ideas. Finding what are the top most important topics in a corpus is something that's super useful, and we do. Like I personally, in my day-to-day job, do clustering and topic modeling like a lot, because there is just a basic need to understand what your set of documents are talking about or what your customers are talking about. And so to give that high level understanding, to make those segments, to identify those clusters of similar ideas, you need to know what topic modeling is, you need to know what clustering is. So topic modeling will involve latent directly allocation and algorithms like that. There is another topic, right, which is dimensionality reduction, which is being able to compress or reduce the dimensionality of all of these high dimensional text inputs into like lower dimensional. Those are some sort of broadly the topics that you should sort of focus on.
Got it. Yeah, that's very helpful. So you have mentioned like four different topics, like for people to get started with, right? And do you think that's enough for interview? Like if people know how to process text data, how to do clustering, and how to do dimension reduction, would that be enough to for interview?
So it depends. I don't wanna claim like a one size fits all kind of like technique, right? Because I mean I don't want to be like, yo, yeah, this is enough, and then people don't get interviews, and then we get in trouble. So we don't want that, right? So what I will say, these are foundational, right? So you want to make sure that you are comfortable with topics like this, and as you do your research, as you go on Medium articles, and as you Google search some of these topics by yourself, you will start to realize some other topics as well that are like pretty important and foundational. And when you go to like ML and deep learning end of things, you want to learn about named entity recognition, sentiment analysis, attention, sequence to sequence modeling, summarization. Essentially, like document summarization is a very important sequence to sequence modeling problem. Language translation is a sequence to sequence modeling problem. You want to look up these keywords and try to get a sense of what these topics are, even if you don't get into the details of everything. There are certain foundational stuff like word to vec. I would highly recommend that you know the ins and outs of, and stuff like TF-IDF.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend that you know. You can dig deep into common NLP tasks that are relevant in deep learning. There's a lot of very, very complicated work happening NLP and deep learning. Like
Right.
there used to be transfer learning. BERT is the rage right now, and so you will definitely get brownie points in interviews. Like if you're able to say, okay, I've worked on this, or I know about this, people will be impressed. But the foundational topics are, that entire sort of that pre-processing domain where you are very, very comfortable with how to handle text data. Another thing I would say, which is important, is some of the evaluation metrics within NLP. For example, perplexity, blue score, root score. You normally come across them as you are working with machine learning in natural language processing, but they're very good to know about, because if an interviewer is asking you questions about NLP, more often than not, they will ask you about metrics, and more often than not, they will ask you about how do you evaluate your model, or how do you decide that this clustering pipeline or this topic modeling pipeline actually works. And so in that case, you do want to have some idea of how NLP specific evaluation metrics work, such as, again, perplexity and blue score and root score and etc. And there are like many different evaluation metrics, but you want to have some idea of how those things work. Yeah.
So in terms of interview preparation, what were the best resources you found in your interview process? And you would recommend people, to look into those books, blog posts, or videos?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, first of all, Google and Medium is our friend. I personally believe that everything that you need to succeed as a data scientist in natural language processing out there in the industry is already there, freely available on the internet, on like Medium articles, um, on like Stack Overflow, and that is the case for like most things. In terms of like where to look for, if you want to learn concepts, then um, look for some of these keywords around like text mining, regex, sequence tokenization, lemmatization. Look into open source natural language processing packages such as Spacey, GenSim, and NLTK, and stuff like that. These are like existing open source packages that will help you parse text data and analyze text data very quickly and very easily. You want to look up these keywords and try to get a sense of what these topics are, even if you don't get into the details of everything. There are some of these things that you can, like research and learn for yourself. But the quickest way of learning is to, like I said before, actually dig into NLP data, natural language data, and do a project by yourself, and build like an end-to-end machine learning pipeline. That will teach you the quickest and help you prepare as well for interviews.
So in terms of projects, you mentioned that the most efficient way to learn NLP is to do projects by themselves. So
Yeah.
there are any websites such as Kaggle, people use Kaggle to do competition, similar websites so that you could look for data and look for NLP projects to practice?
So there are a number of like open source data that is available for NLP, Twitter sentiments, like I think Yelp reviews. There are some of these very popular data sets which you can explore by yourself. Kaggle, as you mentioned, is a very good source to do these introductory kind of like data problems in NLP, right? Like if you look for open source NLP, like the top 10 most popular open source NLP NLP data sets on Google, that'll get you most of the way there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So with that being said, is there anything else you want to share with us today? Such as advice or tips you want to give for someone who's actively looking for a data science job in NLP or data science job in general?
For NLP, I suppose like we've like spoken a lot about data science, but or a lot about specific topics or advice. But don't be afraid to apply to roles that require NLP because you think they might need a lot of expertise and experience. Because, like I said before, you would be surprised how few people are able to do very, very otherwise very simple NLP tasks or basic text processing tasks. Even having text processing and text analytics as a skill is valuable in the industry. So don't be afraid, I guess, of applying to roles that require NLP. If you and especially if you have some background, like you've done like one project which is clearly like a natural language processing oriented project, don't shy away from applying using that to apply to roles which require natural language processing. And I know that a lot of folks who are new to the data science industry and want to break into data science as a professional or as a professional data scientist, it can be very daunting, challenging, and hard to get that first job, right? I faced that. I know a lot of my peers faced it. I know,
Yeah, me
all over
too.
the exactly, right? So in all over the internet, regardless of whether or not you have like a very strong coding background, none of it, like you will always have faced challenges getting your first data science job. And my biggest piece of advice would be to not associate your competence with the job. The most important factor that leads to you getting a job or not is whether your profile matches that job. There is so much competition in data science that there will always be one person or someone out there whose profile exactly matches that job, and therefore that person will get selected and maybe not you. That also leads me to my second point, which is don't look for the perfect job, or don't blindly apply to hundreds of applications. I mean, you should apply to a lot of applications, or apply to a lot of jobs. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you apply to jobs where your profile or your resume matches the job description, and where specific keywords in your resume, specific like projects that the team is working on matches the projects that you have. Profile match is by far the most important factor for getting a job. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's all my questions. Thank you for being here. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions for Deborshi or me. And also please let me know if you like to see similar content in the future. If so, I could invite more guests to join with me to share their data science journeys, interview tips, career advice, and etc. So drop me a comment below if you find it helpful and want to see more videos like this. Stay tuned, I will see you in the next video.